Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you, well, it's not really a book review today, it's more a journey down memory lane for me. I've been thinking a lot about the previous video I did with regards to how I got into fantasy. So I thought I would take you basically back to how I got into Dungeons and Dragons and a little bit of the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and let you see like some of the fantastic art and things like that. Also, I'm testing out some new equipment. That's why the video looks a little bit different, and you can see right here behind me my collection of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons stuff here, my collection of Call of Cthulhu. I am a big role-playing nerd. I run a game every Sunday night for 2 of my friends, a Call of Cthulhu campaign. I will be putting up some campaign notes, basically letting you Plaguelandians know what the story is going to be like. So stay tuned for that, and I will have another book review coming probably on Thursday. If this works out, I might also be getting back into playing some Marvel Champions to showcase a few of the newer decks that have come out. So without any further preamble, let's go into the next episode of... So this is Art and Arcana, a visual history of Dungeons and Dragons, because we all know that the imagery when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons products is just as important as the game itself. So I thought today something different. We'd go through, have a look at some of the pictures, and I'll just talk about my experiences with the game that I remember from back in the day. Let me just try and make it a little bigger, zoom in a little bit. So we have this beautiful hardcover book, some amazing art there. And it goes all the way from the very beginning, a lot of text, a lot of history. So we start with the original edition of Dungeons and Dragons, where it all began. Of course, that was way before my time. Some maps, things like that, some classic art, of course. Here we have these kind of splash pages where you get an evolution of a monster, in this case the purple worm. You can see here from 1974 and all the way to the beautiful 5th edition artwork here. 4th edition looks great as well. We all remember, those of us who have played Dungeons and Dragons all remember making maps like this when we were dungeon mastering. It's from the Tomb of Horrors, one of the original convention run scenarios, if anyone's familiar with that. Classic dice. Early looking beholder here. Doesn't look very scary, of course, but later iterations. I think my favorite is the 2nd edition beholder. It also comes with these little shields. It tells you, like, this piece was the artist Greg Bell's favorite piece that he did, which I think is really, really neat. I apologize if you can hear trucks outside. I have the windows in the apartment open, and because it's ball sweat hot today. Aserarak, the Demi-Lich from the Tomb of Horrors. Of course, this is from the Tomb of Annihilation 5th edition scenario. Early character sheet, I think that's really cool. We have Demo Gorgon, of course made famous by the inclusion in Stranger Things. The kids were playing Dungeons and Dragons. Fantastic looking Demon Lord. there. We have Dragon Magazine. I lived for Dragon Magazine. I would collect it every month. I had a huge stack of them. Absolutely loved it. Always tried to find some back issues at second-hand bookstores. So good. It would give you upcoming products, novels, articles on gameplay, monsters, that kind of a thing. There was a sister magazine called Dungeon that had scenarios in it. Look at this art, though. Isn't this absolutely fantastic? I remember this from the April Fool's issue of Dungeon Magazine. Sorry, Dragon Magazine, not Dungeon Magazine. Okay. So now we have first edition Dungeons and Dragons. I actually had these rulebooks, although I did get them much later. Back, I didn't start playing with them. And a very what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, like, this image is an icon in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, you show this to any old school player and they can tell you exactly what book that came from. And you had, I believe that was all the old modules. White Plume Mountain, the Village of Homlet from Temple of Elemental Evil. You had some great black and white art. Just really fun stuff. Gibbering Mouther down here. Then we have the newspaper article of the search for the student. They believed he went missing due to a Dungeons and Dragons game. He maybe had a psychological disorder. This was around the time when people were against Dungeons and Dragons, thinking it was all devil worship and whatnot. Bring a dragon into your classroom, I wish. The old maps with the hex grids on them. Now we have the splash page of Lolth, Demon Queen of Spiders, Goddess of the Drow. The original iteration, 2008. Just beautiful. Okay. Good old maps. Golden Age Adventures, Ravenloft was a classic. Barrier Peaks. Tomb of Horrors, Against the Giants. Vault of the Drow. These were all kind of reprinted with the same first edition information, but they were reprinted in beautiful hardcover. I did have them, but I gave them away. Fiend Folio. I think that's supposed to be a Githyanki or a Githzeri. Miniatures now. Wasn't really big into the Dungeons and Dragons miniatures. They're a little expensive for my time. The old Dungeons and Dragons video game on Intellivision, although I never actually played it. Bad. Bothered about Dungeons and Dragons, all because one woman's son died and she believed that Dungeons and Dragons were warping their child's minds. I mentioned it a bit in my Whispers in the Dark video. Adventure is yours. Okay, now we have where Dungeons and Dragons kind of gets into cinema a little bit. We have Mazes and Monsters, film starring Tom Hanks, young Tom Hanks in that movie. They were playing Dungeons and Dragons at the beginning of E.T. as well. Those of you might remember that. Now we get to some more classic art and classic source books. Printed in different languages. Now this is one of the most recognizable images in Dungeons and Dragons history. Everyone will have known this image because it appeared on the red box set, the beginner box set for Dungeons and Dragons, which I actually had. I remember colouring in books and things with some of these characters, but I would have loved these toys as a kid. I think they would have been absolutely awesome. I had this colouring book, I remember this, and I had the Viewmaster, I remember this as well. I wish I could remember what that evil fighter's name was. Ah, the old cartoon, a Dungeons and Dragons ride. Really, really cool. I believe there was only 13 episodes, but they're all just awesome. There's Tiamat, Venger, Dungeon Master. I believe that was Strongheart. I believe Strongheart was his name. You had Bobby the Barbarian, the Cavalier, the Ranger, the Acrobat, the Wizard, and the Thief. And of course, Uni, the Unicorn. Really cool. Monster Manual 2. I absolutely adored this art. That's one thing with Dungeons and Dragons. Even if you don't play the game, you could still go into a hobby shop or a game shop or even a bookshop and just look at these covers, and immediately you get that sense of wonder and amazement that comes with this fantastic fantasy art. Dragonlance. I talked about Dragonlance in a previous video. Here we have Caraman and Raistlin, Verminard, Sturm. Actually, I think that's Kytera. Sturm, Tika, Lorak, the Elven King. I love the. You can see how the art evolved from this to become that. The detail that went into even designing the Dragonlances. Those of you that have read the books know that Dragonlances basically are mounted on the sides of dragons, and the rider kind of wields it in combat. Flying Citadel. Even like, I mean, this looks amazing, but even this just looks fantastic as well. One of my absolute favourite Clyde Coldwell pieces. You have, this is from Dragons of Winter Night. You have Lorak, the Elven King, trying to use an orb of dragonkind to control the green dragon Cyan Bloodbane. Here we have the original cover, classic. The calendar. And these are all the modules that were written before the novels even came out. You can actually get these from Drive-Thru-RPG if you want to ever run the original Dragonlance modules. They are available out there at a very reasonable price as well. Larry Elmore, one of the greatest fantasy artists in my opinion. Here we have Raistlin, Verminard, Viewmaster Toad, Huma's Tomb, and the Blood Sea of Ishtar. And if you play through the modules, you can use these as pre-generated characters. It was really, really cool. Have some demigods and deities, some oriental adventurers. There's Dungeon Magazine that had the scenarios in it. Temple of Elemental Evil, an absolute classic scenario. It has actually been rewritten from the original through like 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition, and really Princes of the Apocalypse is the 5th edition version of Temple of Elemental Evil. Also a really great video game as well. I really enjoyed the video game. Dungeons and Dragons Pinball. I believe this creature is an Abyssal Dreadnought, I believe is what that's called. Forgotten Realms, where basically this is what Wizards of the Coast are banking all their money on these days. Crystal Shard by R.A. Salvatore. Fantastic book. The very first novel that had Drizzt, Bruenor, Wulfgar, Regis and Canterbury. The box has Spellfire. Another fantastic book. The cover of Waterdeep. The final book in the Shadowdale, I forget the Shadowdale trilogy. I can't remember what the trilogy was called. Elminster. Undermountain. You actually have a 5th edition version of that as well in Waterdeep Dungeons of the Mad Mage. Just absolutely crazy how huge this campaign was. I never had Ruins of Undermountain. I always wanted it, but I never had it. There we have different versions of Drizzt. This is my favourite one, I think. Although this one has the companion Gwenwyvera, so that's cool. Oh yes, now we get to basically one of the best parts of my childhood. The old Commodore 64, at least that's what I played them on. Pool of Radiance, where you had your party of characters here with their AC and their hit points. And it was kind of like a... you'd wander around like dungeons and towns and things, and then when it went into combat, you had this view. And you could cast, like, this is a Stinking Cloud spell. You can see they're all covered by the gas. Pool of Radiance was the first one. Insanely difficult, but a lot of fun. Hillsfar came next. They tried to do something a little different with Hillsfar and tried to make it into a series of mini-games. It was still good. There was like lock-picking and arena fighting and stuff. Curse of the Azure Bonds was next. My absolute favourite of these video games. Secret of the Silver Blades followed. Then you had the Gateway to the Savage Frontier. There were Dragonlance versions, Champions of Krynn, Death Knights of Krynn, Dark Queen of Krynn. You can get these games on GOG, I believe. I still have them on my computer. They are still awesome. So if you're interested in Dungeons & Dragons games, go for these ones. Or the Ravenloft ones, or the Eye of the Beholder trilogy. Second edition. This was the edition that I had. I got Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide for my birthday. This was the first edition where I was running games as the Dungeon Master as well. The thing that I didn't like about this edition was the Monstrous Compendium. It came in like a binder, and they always used to tear. It was really, really annoying. We have a, I believe that's, I think that's a Tanari. This is where we're getting a lot more different campaign settings. So you had Spelljammer, which was pretty much like Dungeons & Dragons in space. I was never a fan of this setting, to be perfectly honest with you, but I did like the novels that came from it. We have Mind Flayers, Ravenloft. Who doesn't love Ravenloft? Just absolute classic. And the new Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft in 5th edition, I think, did a wonderful job of expanding the setting a little bit. Hollow World. I never got into Hollow World. I had this board game. It was shit. This art comes from the Dungeons & Dragons Rules Cyclopedia. This was a hardcover book that was released that basically was all of the coloured box sets of the original Dungeons & Dragons from basic all the way through to expert. Always wanted this book. My brother had it, and I used to love looking at it, but I never had a copy myself. But now I do. Drive Through RPG. And this book is fantastic. Beautiful art. All the original rules I don't know if I'd ever play the rules, but well worth it. Dark Sun, again, a setting that I was not really familiar with. Let's see if I can, there we go. I did love the novels by Troy Denning, the Prism Pentad. Again, drive-through RPG. Does a fantastic reprint of the original boxed set. Dark Sun I don't think will ever get a 5th edition version, just because it deals with slavery and a lot of issues and things that a lot of people don't really like these days. But you can see very Conan-inspired artwork here. Al-Qadim, kind of like genies and stuff. Set in Zakara, which is part of the Forgotten Realms. Now we get the Monster Manual as a book. This was much better than the folders and the folios. Gen Con. Dungeons and Dragons arcade game. I used to play this in Penrith Plaza. You can actually... Whoops, I'm sorry. You can actually get this on the PlayStation Store along with Tower of Doom and Shadows over Mystara, and they're awesome. Spellfire, I never played. I wasn't really into card games back in the day. Planescape, one of my absolute favorite settings. Basically a giant city of doors that leads to all different planes around the multiverse, and the art I just love. She's the Lady of Pain. I just absolutely adore the art of Planescape. So now we have TSR moving over and reprinting a lot of stuff, and then Wizards of the Coast kind of taking over. Labyrinth of Madness, I had a friend that ran that for a small group of us. That dungeon was insane. More campaign settings, Birthright, stuff using the computer. Some of the best video games, Dungeons & Dragons video games. Baldur's Gate 2. I believe Baldur's Gate 3 is out now, but my computer will not run that. Icewind Dale, awesome. And Planescape Torment. A friend of mine over here, I met him over here, Jake Mongan, actually recommended Planescape Torment to me. It had flown under my radar. This game is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you, Jake, for that. Then we have anniversary editions. Then we go into 3rd edition. This is the one that I've actually played the most. I was running campaigns for my friends back in Australia before I came over here. Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide. Have different orcs. I'm just in awe, like looking at these pictures, how much it brings back. I never even knew there was a Dungeons & Dragons Warcraft source book. This was when the D20 system, so creators could basically make all of their own worlds and things and sell them under the D20 system. It was a really great idea, and you got some very, very interesting some very interesting settings out of it. Priestess of Leviathan, Goddess of Pain. Oh, yeah, okay. Neverwinter Nights, again, another fantastic game. The Roper. Eberron, a very famous campaign setting that I never actually got into when it first came out. But I've actually read the 5th edition source book, and it is really, really interesting. And I'm really pissed off at myself that I never got into it back in the day. Look at this art by Wayne Reynolds. He actually did a lot of the art for Pathfinder. But his art is just so dynamic. Really, really love the colours that he uses, the shading. Dungeons & Dragons Online, never played. I was a World of Warcraft guy when that was out. 4th edition. This is really interesting. I hated 4th edition. I hated the fact that it was trying to be more of a miniatures-based game, yet I had every source book. Because the rules were good. I mean, there was nothing wrong with the rules. It's just, unless you had miniatures, it was very difficult to kind of determine. This is where we first get Dragonborn, I think, as well. Some more Wayne Reynolds. The Owlbear, an iconic Dungeons & Dragons creature. You can just look at these pictures for hours and just see so much little detail in them. Here's where we get reprints of the old 1st edition stuff as well, like the starter set and the box set. Forgotten Realms. The board games. Lords of Waterdeep is a fantastic worker placement board game. I actually got it thinking my wife would like it more than some of the other games we played, but not the case. Legend of Drizzt. Yeah, these games are pretty good, the Dungeons & Dragons board games. I don't have mine anymore. And now we have latest edition, 5th edition, which I hope to get to the table soon, now that I have a dedicated group of nerdlingers that love role-playing. We're in a Call of Cthulhu campaign at the moment. Curse of Strahd. I was just looking at this earlier today. Different iterations of Strahd von Zarovich. The Doom Vault. Volo's Guide to Monsters. Here we have the Sword Coast. This is where all of the Forgotten Realms stuff is pretty much taking place. You've still got the Anarok Desert, High Forest, Waterdeep, Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate. I believe Candlekeep is just down here. Zugdmoy, Demon Queen of Fungus. We have Tiamat, the 5-headed dragon. We have black, blue, red, green, and white. In Dragonlance, she is known as Tarkisis. It's pretty much the same thing. Critical Role. Then you have all the different players' handbooks, Dungeon Master's Guides. What's up, kitty kitty? No, Daddy's talking. No, you don't play Dungeons and Dragons. And the monster manuals. So just going through this book, got the index. Just going through this book just brings back so many just really fond memories of Dungeons and Dragons, getting into Dungeons and Dragons, going and looking at some of the covers of the original 1st edition stuff, which I was too young to really understand, but those covers always stuck with me and were just awesome. So this has been my little trip down memory lane. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you all in the next video.